We're good? 6:30, we'll call the meeting to order. Let's take some introductions. I am Paul Pauls, I'm the president of the association. Lynn Yercha.
Mr. Officer.
Treasurer.
From Peoria.
Miguel, Peoria. Yeah. Thank you for being here tonight in the rain. I want to thank you all for taking a part in tonight's meeting as well. Establish quorum. We have all 4 board members, current active board members. So I believe we have a quorum. First item up for bid. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our last open meeting, which was August 24th. I've read through them. I don't have any adjustments. Are there any other minutes? Anybody have any edits? Chris? Nope. So do I get a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting?
Motion to accept the minutes.
Motion, I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Great. Okay, one of the main topics for tonight's meeting was to discuss the 2020 annual operating budget. We go through some of the numbers that people have been asking about. First of all, PRM apologizes once again for not having the July financials at the last meeting. But as you can see, July, August, September, and October are all here. It was merely an oversight, so it's no deal. You have them all. And at any point in time, if anyone wants any of our documents that have been made public or can be made public, all you need to do is contact PRM directly, and they will make sure that you get what you have. Did everyone get a copy of the 2020 proposed budget? And he'll have one in a second. Some of the highlights of the budget before we actually get into the detail. The board is once again recommending no increase in the quarterly assessments. You'll see my reserve fund analysis coming up shortly. The board at this point feels that even with our expected expenditures out of our reserve fund, given the engineering study and the overage that we were going into this year, as well, we were about 120% funded, and that included setting up expenditures for painting and so on, and some of the items that we had already taken care of. So we feel that the reserve fund is adequate at this point. We had mulled over, or at least discussed, the possibility of raising it nominally, but rather than nickel and diming, raise it $4 a quarter, what's the impact? $10,000, $11,000 in the reserve fund. Let's wait until the reserve study indicates as such that it really needs it. That coupled with the fact that we should be getting ballpark numbers. We don't have the final reconciliation of the cost of the path work on the non-com, but that's going to be somewhere in the area of $18,000 to $24,000. That coupled with the legal expenses of transferring the non-com property to our association, those expenses will be taken out of the $100,000 and some odd dollars that was sent to them, and we will receive 70% of those funds. I'm estimating it's going to be somewhere between $55,000 and $60,000. It may be slightly higher, it may be slightly lower. But at least we've gotten them to share in the cost of the transfer of the property, legally ceding that property, to our association, and at least bearing 30% of the cost of fixing that path. The full year management services fees, I want to point this out, and this is not a slam to PRM. I'm sorry Paul's not here. We did discuss this. Paul was in the room when we did discuss this at our budget planning meeting, and we had one participant who joined us. The projected full year management services fee are 73% higher than your 2000 actual. And that's on the very last page if you want to see the details. You may recall that it was purported that AAM was charging us at least 20% more because they were getting quote-unquote service fees, or otherwise known as kickbacks. Well, what it turns out is the reason we were able to get a lower management contract is because the office expenses associated with copies, mailings, et cetera, or higher or a la carte under PRM services. And instead of experiencing a 20% decrease in management fees, we're going to see about a 73% increase net when we add in all the services. On the plus side, we have worked very closely with PRM, and PRM has been very gracious. They are looking at ways to not only eliminate, reduce, and or bundle their services going into 2020. So we do have their commitment to reduce those fees and bring us more in line. The 2020 budget landscape fees are lower than 2019, but still 30% higher than 2018. Once again, if you go to the tab, looking at the one page before that management fee tab, we'll get into more detail on this, but the issue we had was, once again, we were told that the landscape company that we had was an AAM owned company, and that's why they were charging us more. Well, it turns out that the bid scope was not the same. So the services that were being performed by our previous landscape company included some of the services that we're now getting billed for. So you'll see that although we are going to maintain the increase because we're adding in services, we have been able to negotiate with our landscaper. We expect to further negotiate reductions. Again, that's why we're above last year's costs, 2018 being last year. A lot of the trail maintenance and some of the tree pruning, some of the light tree pruning was included in the base services last year, but the full pruning and the fiber leeway that are now on those the walls to the houses, all of that work was extra. And that's why we experienced some higher expenses this year. Year-to-date legal expenses, we're going to get into this in more detail, but there was a question as far as why we had $54,000 in expenses. There's a nice detail, there's 2 or 3 pages of a reconciliation and a detail as to where those expenses came from, and I'll let Patrick and Chris get into that shortly. And but we were able to recover $10,000 of fees that were improperly reimbursed to a homeowner, and those fees were paid back, and we were able to recover some of those fees. If you go to the next page, the next 2 pages actually, front and back of the next page, it's the actual breakout of where we stand at the 9-month actual through September, the proposed 2020 budget, and the 2018 actual. Sorry, I don't have
Just to point something out.
Please.
So the 2020 budget is based on run rates of the year-to-dates through.
Just go ahead and steal my
Oh,
thunder.
that was gonna say that.
In most cases, I'll go along with what Chris just said. In most cases, you'll find that the 2020 budget amount is the 9-month year-to-date annualized, because that's what we expect it to be. There are certain expenses that we know won't be recurring, so we just carried that straight across. And there were some that we obviously expect some year-end work as well. So for the most part, it is absolutely September divided by 9 times 12. If you look at that, the net income for 2019 is simply because those funds have not yet been transferred to the reserve fund. So that money will, any excess in income, which is the assessments to the homes minus the expenses, will help fund the reserve fund. And I've taken that into consideration on the next page. If you look at the reserve fund balance, you will see where I believe, based on our current run rate, where we're going to end the year, which is $491,000. We're looking at proposed projects. There's 2 different scenarios that we may or may not take, depending on how much we want to bite off. Phase 2 of the painting in the walls, considerable amount. These are some of those large common walls that were not painted, the exterior walls, and some of the under walls underneath the railings. Those walls will all need to be painted as well, and as you can see, that's going to run about $64,000 based on current estimate. The railings and the iron, we've received a bid for that of about approximately $44,000. The granite is really the big issue that's between scenario 1 and 2, whether or not we're going to do one phase, 2 phases, or no phase. You may recall 2 years ago, the first phase of 3 at $70,000 was done. There were some questions by an engineer that was questioning whether or not we got the tonnage of the granite that we had ordered. So the rest of the project was tabled at that point in time. So we're going to revisit that again. Top lot resurfacing and some other trail repairs. If you haven't seen what they've done to the non-com trail, Pat, would you like to just talk to it? I mean,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal what they've done. And we have to assess at some point the rejuvenation of the rest of the paths in our community. We're assuming $50,000 at this point, at least to start a project. We have not even gotten a scope. We do know, again, that the project that they've undertaken, which is a small project, is about $18,000 to $24,000. So this is something we're going to have to go out to bid on, but it is definitely something, if you walk the paths, there's a lot of holes, there's a lot of erosion, a lot of deterioration. And that is one of the aesthetic highlights of our community is the walking paths.
Yeah, so just to point out something on this page.
Please.
The anticipated reserve fund, every 4 years, we anticipate that to keep everything up to date, we're going to need to keep spending money at a good rate. It seems like there's been a lot of projects that have fallen off and we haven't addressed them. And it's going to be time to address this on a regular basis.
Yeah. When you think about the painting, and I know Jose starts, I'm not going to steal his thunder, but you know, if you look around, if you walk around the community, you can see where we haven't had paint and we haven't had anything protecting the railings. You start to have erosion against the iron. You start to have wall issues, and so you know what starts as just paint ends up being paint. Repair. It just gets more and more. So having that in the operating budget and making sure that that is just budgeted for every 4 years takes that off the table. Everybody knows it's coming. It's budgeted for. It's included in the planning for anything from an assessment perspective. Same thing with the granite. Erosion. I mean, you walk around, and I guess I'll touch on it now. If you look at if you happen to see when you either leave tomorrow, the entrance trail actually right here before you get to the resort has just been rejuvenated. It looks fantastic. That's what the trails are supposed to look like. There's certain areas where it's better than others. There's certain areas where we basically don't have any more granite. So making sure that that's replenished every 4 years, it's a huge add-on to our community. It's one of the reasons that home values are what they are. People like having that community. So it's within our best interest to make sure that we keep that up to date.
That's why I added that third column there, just to give you an idea that every 4 years, we're going to have at least that $224,000 in addition to what we're looking at. So that's one of the considerations when we look at the currently overfunded reserve fund versus what we plan to expend this year versus what we know is on the horizon 4 years from now. So we are taking that all into consideration. And again, the board has agreed, at least in this proposal, not to increase any fees at this point. You can see the estimated reserve fund balance at 12/31 based on our projections going through 2020, which should leave us adequately and fairly funded.
Hey, Paul, just go back on
Please.
the trails. There's at least one trail that's asphalt, right?
Yeah, so there's actually a couple places within the trails themselves that actually have an asphalt entrance, and it's interesting because I've talked to various people as to why did we do that, and without having access to the actual developers, it's hard to tell. I mean, I would assume potentially that might be for access for fire and things like that, if we need to get through that trail system. Other than that, it doesn't fit. Either that or they had an initial plan of doing asphalt all the way through, and they just decided to cut corners at the end during the 2008 crisis, but
There's just nothing in the budget to.
well, there's
Suggest
options.
that?
Well, there's options that you could look at. I think once we get to the trail portion of the PPG, you could re-asphalt it. And also in talking to landscapers, you could actually granite, you could just create granite over it and level it out to where you don't necessarily have to continue to repair the asphalt, you can have it match the rest of the trail, so.
That would probably be the way to go.
Yeah.
Is it possible, was ADA required?
Good question, I'm not sure.
So we probably want to check into that before we.
Yeah. What's interesting is if it was ADA required, it's for, you know, obviously accessibility, why would you stop, right? And
Right.
I think you would have that. Because once you're on the trail, what do you do when you run out of the trail? So that's.
Yeah.
So, but it's a fair question, for sure.
It's kind of like, sorry.
Yeah. So to be clear, we won't.
Wants to be part of this discussion.
It came up in some of the.
Good, I'm done. Sorry. Because the other thing with the ADA is the handrails, they're at a higher height than is required by city code as well. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
And if it doesn't, then we, you know.
Yeah, I think, well, yeah, we definitely, we haven't made any final decisions on, do we keep it asphalt, do we, just go ahead and add the trail over it? It's something we'll definitely talk about. in
My
the future.
knee
We're
jerk
not-
is,
we're not
I
doing
think
it.
I think they initially intended for an all-the-way asphalt.
That's what
And-
makes
and-
sense.
And when it started to hit down, they just started thinning out multiple things like the Fountain Ridge promise and all that stuff.
Right.
Patrick, would you like to go through the legal expense analysis? And Chris, I believe you're gonna.
Chris,
Chris, let me kick off and I'll add in.
All right, so, just a couple of things. There's some costs we incurred that I hope we never have to incur again. So, one of them is the ADRB complaint.
Sorry, Chris, what page?
So this is
Legal expense analysis.
legal expense analysis, right, and we've got
It's on the back of the third page.
yeah, back of the third.
Hi, we have an empty, how come 10 seconds?
Oh, after we're done with the budget, we'll discuss that after this.
Okay, all right. So, the legal complaints. So, essentially, this was us deciding to fight around HOA rules. And so we spent money with a lawyer to decide to try to not follow our own HOA rules. I don't think we as a board are going to do that ever again. So, our HOA rules are what we moved in here with, and that's what we're going to live with. And if we all want to agree to change them, we change them as a community. Not us as a board would change them. They are what they are. So that expense won't happen again. The legal general other. So we did have $10,000 we recovered from an expense that I think we don't have to go through that process again.
Go 2 pages over and you got the full account.
All right. Yeah, there we go. All right. So $54,000, $23,000 was legal expenses we kind of agreed with. And so just to give everybody guidance to what those kind of charges are, when a homeowner doesn't pay their HOA dues, we send them a letter to say, hey, pay your HOA dues. If they don't pay over time, we end up filing a lien against the house.
Chris,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. If you go back 1 page, there's the full detail of the $24,000 in ditch billing.
Yeah. Yeah, we should, yeah. But let me just talk about what that kind of stuff is. So, I guess we'll start on what would be your page 4, front side. So it's this one right here.
Tiny
You see
waste.
it?
Sorry.
What does it look like?
It says sanitary building analysis. And so I'll go across the columns and kind of explain what those numbers are. Let me just see if I can do this right. All right, the first one. So I'll go across the heads and talk about what they are, and then talk about the detail of each one. So we had a non-board member that was talking to our attorneys. You'll see the name is Ms. Palmer. There's 2 columns of expenses, one of which we did approve and one of which we did not approve. So it's not typical for any non-board members to ever talk to an attorney unless
So the attorney was calling her just as the attorney did call me.
So,
Just make it clear, so it's transparent.
It was
Thank
executive
you.
board issues, executive.
Hey, the lawyer called her, tell her to take it up with the
Go
lawyer.
ahead.
so, again, these are things that won't happen on the board normally. They shouldn't happen. You shouldn't have non-board members being involved with anything on the executive sessions.
So you have processes or something in place that would prevent this from happening?
Yeah, we don't have other people involved with those discussions except board members.
Great.
Okay?
Our current legal has been
I
devised.
think the other thing to mention, just to add on to that, is there's not any unilateral discussions with an attorney, meaning if we're going to engage legal counsel where it would be a billable expense, that's something that is board approved across all members.
So what we do is if there's a legal issue, we talk about it in an email amongst all of us. And then if we have to have a special session, and we do that in executive session, we make a decision as a group. Not any single person has any one-on-one time with the lawyer. It just doesn't happen.
Fantastic.
Oh.
Good plan.
And so PRM expense.
What about, oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
what about the meeting with Goodman?
There,
He's a lawyer.
he is a lawyer, and he has been retained. There are times that we as a board will designate someone to say, okay, here's the direction of the board. Please go and make sure that's exactly what happens.
No, I think the clarification is also, any billable activity
Correct.
is full board approved.
Yeah.
Everyone on the board, not 2 or 3 members of the board, the entire board weighs in. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, and so as we go across, there was some question around some PRM expenses, so we had the expenses there. Ms. Clover in the back had some questions that got billed against her. We had someone ask about an election handout. We paid $258 for that handout. The lawyer told him it was legal. And then we had $5,418 spent on an investigation against a board member to basically try to see if it was an illegal disbursement to refund the homeowner $1,000. So again,
Those are all-
this board will not engage in, if I have a $500 issue, we shouldn't spend more than $500 to discuss it. It's just not going to happen. So appropriate board expenses, 9591. So that's the detail of the 23,000. Anything you want to add? Yeah.
Hey Chris, I'm seeing some of the reimbursements, but I'm not seeing all the reimbursements. So it's kind of like we handpicked some of the reimbursements, but I don't see the reimbursement on here that we gave $1,000 back to the homeowner.
We'll get to the next page.
Well, no, that wasn't a legal fee.
Did you just say you were legal fee to investigate it?
No, that was the legal fees to investigate me for approving it with executive meetings.
Okay, but still it's an expenditure from our dues, right?
It wasn't your dues, I put the money in.
It's a deposit.
It was a deposit, it had nothing to do with
It was a
dues.
refund.
You know, that's up for negotiations, I'm here now both ways, so, but why is
Pretty
it?
clear.
You have a problem?
It's pretty clear cut and dry.
That's not what I hear. But why don't we see that?
So your information's
Okay,
incorrect.
go ahead, Chris, please.
We're
Move on.
moving on.
Opinion.
All right, next
No,
page.
actually it's not. As the homeowner.
If something is non-refundable,
Okay, do you want me, what makes more sense here, Tim? You guys screwed
honestly,
up with it all.
transparency makes more sense to me.
And I've given all that information, time and time and time
I
again.
didn't
So how
say
is it, how you guys then can't get it through your head? The amount of money that the board would have had to spend, this community would have had to spend because you guys screwed up?
No, I didn't.
Is it that difficult?
That was 8 a.m. this
Kim?
Well,
Chris,
We're moving on.
Chris, let's move on.
If you want to have that discussion, you can have it outside the meeting after we're done. So, other detail here, expenses we paid that maybe we probably should have paid. There was a reimbursement for an issue with, and Mr. Dennis here, so that's there, $13,927. The ADRE defense, $8,900. That's $5,600 that we're going to hopefully get back soon. And then Goodman Law expenses. So the Goodman Law expenses, I think, is a wash.
More than, we're positive on that.
Yeah. So, the collection attorney. So here's where you, like I was mentioning before, have an issue with someone not paying your dues, and spend money to get the dues back, and essentially when it comes back, it's very easy. So that's the detail of $54,000. Hopefully we'll never have another $54,000 a year again. It's a waste of your money, waste of everybody's money. And so, anything you want to add, Patrick?
No, other than the fact that, a lot of people are making comments or having concerns about the legal expenses, I'm 100% in agreement. It is a ridiculous amount of money. I'll tell you, we've, comparatively speaking, against the beginning part of the year to now, the current board spent about 10% of that. I think we spent something like $4,500 in legal expenses to recoup over $10,000 to the community. So again, we're a net positive on legal expense. We don't foresee having any of the ad hoc situations that Chris has talked about, because again, it's a frivolous waste of money. It's not going to do it.
And of course, you can't name names on any legal activities, but how many legal cases are pending right now
Define legal cases.
where an attorney that you've retained is actively taking part?
So are you asking,
in a legal
so how
situation?
many lawsuits do we have in process? I don't know, none.
We have 0 lawsuits.
So the lawyer's not actively
I
involved?
didn't say that, you asked lawsuits, there's 0 lawsuits.
Is the-
Nothing has been
There's
filed.
0 lawsuits filed in open record.
No, I didn't say lawsuits, I said legal activities. The lawyer legally actively involved in any issues with homeowners?
Yes, we do have.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have that all the time.
And just like I said, you're trying to recover fees from homeowners. We've absolutely
No,
said,
not recovering fees, but like actively pursuing, like they're doing something against the CCNRs or,
Yeah, don't worry, it's nothing like the money you guys spend, so.
oh, well, this is a lot more.
No,
This year.
$4,300, the $5,000 was prior to this board taking over. And just to address that, we left $15,000 in there for next year's budget. We anticipate that any actions taken would be in enforcement of a CCNR or any of those types of items, which would be recovered. The $15,000 would be for cleaning up any old legacy legal issues that we have to clean up before we would get to that point to where you go after a collection agent, you're trying to collect a balance, they pay the back fees plus the legal fees associated with it.
so any type of legal action we would take, I would anticipate that we would take it without anticipation of full recovery.
So,
But that would require entire board member.
Yeah.
board
Yes.
approval, correct?
No unilateral communication.
Kevin?
yeah, a question and maybe a comment. There's been a lot of activity in the past and so some of it is surprising for some of us. But going forward, I don't know if we need to state names or situations, but could you be more transparent with some of the legal actions, at least as far as the type of situation, whether it's without maybe naming?
I'll give you an example. This will, without naming names or anything, but say we have a situation where there's an issue brought up where something is violation of the CCNRs, right? And we have a management company, and that management company's job is to work with our homeowners to try and remediate any issues that they may have. So, for instance, if somebody does something that's against the rules, contact the homeowner. Hey, this is against the rules. We'd like you not to do this. Okay, and then if there's non-compliance, that starts to escalate and potentially becomes a situation where the board becomes involved. I think, I don't want to speak for everybody here, but for all of us, we'll try to resolve issues in the most, expeditious and least expensive way possible. But if we get to a point where we can't move forward and, you know, the homeowner is in violation, if it requires, you know, an attorney to get involved, that's a decision you gotta make. I don't think any of us want to do it, but if you get to a point where you're at an impasse, that's gonna happen.
There are several steps that we take to not get a lawyer involved. Maybe I've had plenty of chances to.
Letters,
Is that the fine policy that you're referring to?
What's that?
Is that the fine policy, David, that you're referring to? That's being followed?
Fines, letters,
Discussions with the board.
you know.
We want to resolve it amongst homeowners first. So we're all homeowners, we don't want any issues. So if we can resolve it amongst ourselves without a lawyer, we'll do that. But if someone just pretty much shows us the high sign and doesn't want to work with our group logic, then I guess we'll have to leave that.
Mark, did you have another issue?
Yeah, well, since my name was put in here, and I didn't know that was, you guys were allowed to do that, but, let's
We're not
clarify that.
discussing the actual issue, we're just discussing the reimbursement. There was a question asked, where did the $54,000?
My name's in this document with the reimbursement.
Right.
I want to be clear, my first reimbursement was court ordered. Okay? So that, let's just
Yeah.
clarify that, that was court
And let
ordered.
me just, since you brought it up, I'm happily gonna add something to it. We've been invited by our lawyer, it's in our minutes. All we had to do is show up and have a discussion, and we may not even had a judge. So, you're right, it was court ordered, because the previous folks on the board chose not to send a lawyer to that meeting.
Your lawyer quit,
No, he
so let's
didn't.
be
Yeah,
honest.
we did,
Yes,
that's
he
when you
did.
resigned.
So,
Go back and get your dates.
We could have retained additional attorneys, but I believe it was right in this room when
Well, legal
the
expenses were up. right?
acting president, and I do say acting president, said the only reason you won is we did not show up.
Believe that.
So, okay,
Correct.
so that is the legal proposal for the year, just so you know where it came from. Patrick, give him that flag. You want to discuss the landscape?
Yeah, landscaping. So, updates for landscaping, we have completed all the tree trimming, hopefully you've had a chance to see it, looks a lot different around the community. We actually had a couple homeowners reach out, where they had some trees encroaching on their property from, the shared area where we had some trees, we were able to take care of that for some homeowners, which was great. Overseeing is done, and then I talked about the trail, but again, I mean, I think the trail maintenance that was done, with, finishing up our trail system with the non-com looks really, really good. I think it's a good benchmark for us, for what the trail system should look like. And then just to sum up what was discussed in the budget, we continue to work with our landscaper to look at ways that we can continue to save additional funds, specifically making sure that some of the things that were ad hoc, like tree trimming, trail maintenance, is in the overall landscape budget, so that way we can drive down the total expenditure over the course of the year, because it becomes planned maintenance, it's not as big of an overhaul as we have. And it was funny, and if you go to the backside of the trail over there, by, what's that track? And the street right there, the backside of that wall where they had to clear out the area for the fire mitigation area that we put in, they took something like 22 truckloads out of there. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So just making sure stuff like that stays up to date, and we shouldn't see anywhere near the cleanup expenditures that we had seen for this year.
And obviously, not just aesthetics, but safety, because that was all dry brush that could have caught fire, as it did in Scottsdale and several other areas, putting homes in peril and so on.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the vandalism piece in the new business, but I would just say, it's interesting. There's been a lot of posts lately that just, horse playing kids and neighborhoods around here doing donuts and green belts and things like that. So if you see something, just call the management company. Obviously, we're spending a lot of time and effort to keep the community looking good. And I saw last year around this time, somebody had done some donuts in one of the retaining areas over there. So just again, if you see something, please reach out to me.
Another thing that we've experienced recently is some damage and vandalism to the sprinkler vents. So if you see anyone, walking around kicking sprinkler heads or taking the tops off of the valves, the water valves. Believe it or not, we still have some of those going on as well. Please feel free to report.
Getting back to the removal of the debris and the excess growth, have we talked to ABC Landscapes about decreasing that watering? I know it's something I brought up before. That's one of the reasons I feel like it got so overgrown. Those are desert plants, they don't need.
Yeah, you're talking about in the trail system?
Yeah.
Yeah, they actually disabled a few of the, irrigation.
Okay.
In that
So-
area that you're talking about, where we have mosquitoes and stuff.
Yeah, just a ton of growth, excess growth. So is that something we might see decrease as far as like landscape maintenance dues in the future based on that trail maintenance?
Certainly
Because it's not gonna be, well, there's not gonna be the upkeep either if the plants aren't overgrown.
Yeah, I mean, we would hope so. I still think, my personal opinion is I think there's still an opportunity to even do a little bit more cleanup. I think the first pass was just make sure that the trails were passable.
Okay.
Make sure that we did our due diligence to create a fire protection barrier against shared walls with homeowners. But there's still a lot of opportunity, I think, to clean out some additional dead brush, and it's something we'll talk with them about.
If you look at the line item on your budget, it's between $60,000 and $65,000 for water.
Okay, so that is an issue, just to reiterate, that is an issue you guys are working on with them for the desert areas to decrease irrigation.
To become desert areas.
Okay.
To remain here. Michelle? Yeah.
When is the time to talk about those sprinklers and broken sprinkler heads and things of that nature?
Do we have that new business?
Yeah, well, we don't have it, we have a homeowner session as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get to it.
Okay.
Yes.
I thought in the, when we took the proposal for clearing the paths, we cleared the paths, but I thought we were going 2 to 3 feet away from the pathways. Are we still doing that, or?
Yeah.
I only see that done in one section, in the section that I walked. And actually behind her house, they cleared all the way up to the walls, but they didn't clear.
If you go to any of the areas where, in the open space where there was brush that, was adjacent to a homeowner's wall, there's a 5-foot barrier, that's all cleared out. And actually, I was just walking last week, and that's still, they were maintaining and trimming that up a little bit more as of last week. On the trail itself, we did the 2 feet on each side. So if there's an area that you see, just tell us, we'll go out there and clear it.
All right. Now, listen, what they've done looks pretty good. I'd like to see it trimmed a little bit more away from that.
Yeah, I feel like we're gonna do it already now.
Yeah.
Scrap that up, so.
According to our CCNRs, the board has to approve a budget 30 days prior to the enactment of said assessments and/or budget. Obviously, this would go into effect January 1st. We're well within our time frame. We'll vote on this along with all the other items at the end of the meeting. So unless there's any other questions, we'll move on to the open seat. Ken Palmer has resigned from the board. I don't know if anyone wants to add any color to that. We have an open seat that will run the remainder of his term, which will be not the annual meeting coming up this May, but the following May. And so it'll be just a little over a year and a half, because of the way our annual meetings fall. And right now, I just think for somebody who has shown a commitment to the community as far as getting involved in responding and getting involved in trying to learn more about what we're doing, I'd like to take the opportunity to nominate Chris Pruitt for the seat that's open. Chris, do you want to stand up and talk at all? Just give your address, or at least what neighborhood.
Address and phone number.
Oh,
My wife and I are 2 days, we lived here, it'll be 9 years in March, so obviously been here for a while. I can remember 9 years ago when we first started coming, board ran functions perfectly, no issues, didn't think much about it. So obviously, similar to probably a lot of people, I didn't start coming again until things started getting more crazy. And then I've reached out and had conversations with 3 of the 4 board members currently, just really looking to see what we're doing as a board to continue to move forward and what I can do to be involved in this and that. I'm definitely one that coming in, I have 0 agendas. I've never had any legal issues with the board, never had any legal issues, period. So I'm coming in really with the best interests of the homeowners. Like, I want to make sure, kind of like what's been talked about, that the decisions that we make as a board make sense, that we're not spending money frivolously, and it really will make a great community with it. It's a great area, and we've got a lot of opportunity.
And for those of you that are wondering why we're doing this after the discussion of the budget, we're doing this after the discussion of the budget because whomever is nominated and eventually fills the seat is not part of the budget discussion. So therefore, we didn't want to put them in the middle of having to try to explain and talk about the budget, not being a part of putting it together. So the nomination is on the table.
I second.
Patrick seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Chris, come on up.
Welcome.
Congratulations, I think. Welcome. Okay, old business. Let's talk about the non-com update, which I pretty much already gave you. We're anticipating somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000, $55,000 and $60,000. That would go right into a reserve fund. If you look at the reserve fund analysis in the budget, I've already accounted for that money coming back in. We have assurances from the representation for the resort that he is working as feverishly as he can. It was tough for them to get the trade to fix the pathway because construction is just booming in the valley right now. So that was the delay in getting it taken care of, and hopefully we'll have this resolved by year end, definitely Q1 of 2020. The archive update, there really is no archive update. The reason there isn't, we're working with PRM or discussing with PRM a website or at least a partition where we can put potential documents, our agendas, our financials, our CCNRs, current CCNRs, so you don't have to call them to get the answers, you can look them up yourself. And in addition to that, though, a copy of the thumb drives have been provided to alternate board members, so I am not the only board member with the historical documentation. ABC committee update. ARC.
For the ARC update, we have 3 open issues. We're going to approve 2 of the 3. We've had 3 closed, and so most of it simple landscaping type things. One house bill is currently being reviewed. It looks fine. It falls in the CTRs. We had, if you remember, last meeting, we talked about a building that was being proposed in empty section of the neighborhood. The plans didn't conform. They did end up making them conform, and so we did give approval to that. Right now, they have approval to build. I'm not sure if they're moving forward or not. Other than that, we have 1 new build that's going to happen as well. So, and it looks fine. So, we'll be getting those approvals out in the week. So.
Quick question on that. Is one of those buildings for updike?
It is.
So, nice to meet you. Yes. Welcome to join your community.
Nice
build fast
nice
enough.
following your plan, but
Tried really hard to follow the guidelines. I printed them all out. I highlighted them all. I wanted to make sure. Now, so anyway,
Glad to have you.
lunch. I love that. So excited to be a part of the community.
glad to have you. So, other than that, I think it's good.
Landscape committee? Oh.
You had stated in a previous meeting you were going to announce ARC meetings. Where are those being announced?
We haven't announced the one yet because we're doing stuff via email consensus wise.
You're doing what?
We're doing 100% consensus. If everybody agrees, we don't need to meet. If everybody doesn't agree, then we need to meet. So far, we haven't had any, everybody's on the approved side. We haven't had mixed approvals all day. So in other words, we have everybody either saying, yeah, it's good, or hey, it's not good, we need to send it back. So we haven't had to have any in-person sessions.
Patrick, landscape committee.
Landscape. Sorry, no landscape update. Any questions? All right.
Great job.
Events committee.
Yes, so we talked about the events committee a couple of times. We've had some homeowners that had some interest in it. Zay reached out to me about the events committee. Kim, I think you also shared some interest. So one of the things that we accounted for in the 2020 budget is a budget line be able to do events within the community. We've had a lot of folks inquire about, hey, can we do some things around the holidays, or we maybe do movie in the park. We haven't had, number one, a formal group of homeowners that could assist with that, and then number two, the budget for it. So one of the things that we did is we made sure that that was accounted for in 2020. Doesn't mean we'll spend all of the accounted for funds, but if we're able to pull something together, something that looks good for the community, we'll certainly do it.
So one suggestion in regards to those events, and even for meetings and what we would do, I think we've gone past in the 21st century now, sticking everything to the side of the mailbox. Perhaps we can even create or have installed, they have a lot of the communities around us where they just basically have our own like little post box, you know what I mean, like a clear glass on it. And then you can have different things in there. You can do any of the events in there, you can do meetings, you can do what questions that people have in regards to, I know painting comes up all the time, and it's a real cumbersome kind of thing to be able to do. But if you had the website and something visual that would be maybe near the mailboxes where everybody pretty much goes, that might be another idea for the future.
Yeah, I think to couple that, the website, sorry.
It would look a lot better than, just.
We're able to put it on the website too,
Well,
yeah.
we currently don't take things to the mailboxes anymore. That was done for short notice.
Yeah.
There are approximately, and I'm ballparking right now, there's approximately 40 homeowners that have not provided valid email addresses, and they require paper mailings of documentation.
Yeah.
Otherwise, PRM has the email addresses for all the registered homeowners. If you have not registered with PRM, please call them and update your email so you will get them. There are also two websites outside of the blast from PRM. There is the Cibola Vista website, which has Nextdoor, which has a Cibola Vista community group, and there is also a Facebook group that has a community group in there. And there's still people on there that have moved away, but they're still in there. But
yeah.
There's plenty of ways to get the news. I'm not poo-pooing your suggestion, but there is a cost, is all I'm saying.
Oh, for certain, yeah.
And then there's obviously making sure that all the notifications that are put in there are up to date and so on. So
yeah, just to speak, in our community, we don't have a community center. We don't have, we're essentially borrowing right from the resort and whatnot. So it'd be nice to be able to have something where, hey, that'd be neat to be able to get involved with all the, check your email. I don't know if that's the right answer.
Well, maybe, yeah.
Chris, are you still putting together a website? You had mentioned that quite a while back.
I said we needed to, I wasn't putting it together myself, I don't have time.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
That's what I was gonna say.
I will take the job and volunteer to go through door to door to get people onto a website. I think that a website is a fantastic idea. I think that from a voting perspective, it's really hard. You can see from the how many people are here tonight. It's really difficult for people to come in the middle of the week. And I think that it would really help for some of the community events as well.
Yep.
So I will take that and.
I'd be happy to work with you.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
What's your name? I'm sorry.
Kim Bissell.
I'm sorry, I'm Kim Bissell. Hi, Kim Clover, how are you?
And I'm sorry, and you are, you?
Jose Garcia.
That's a good segue.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Perfect, good time.
Yeah.
Please, we have a Primo Paint update. You want to come on up and give us a...
Sure, I don't really have a whole lot to be able, if you have any questions in regards to that, I think the biggest thing, my name is Jose Garcia, I'm the owner of Primo Paint, and our company is the one that did the community wall already. The majority of the community wall, I should say, because we still have stuff to do, right? We got rid of the yellow, thank God, for most part. And thanks even to the other, I know it's gone through a bunch of different things, but we were in the middle of the project, we switched board members, we did all that, but you know what, giving props to both, they really have worked well with us. PRM and the new board is also just kind of taking it in stride, so that's been a good thing about it. So the next phase that we're going to begin into, what's listed as phase 2, for the actual walls, the remaining walls, are the rest of what we call the pony walls, the walls that are beneath the view fences. Some of them are visible from the street, so the initial proposal did not include any of those particular ones because we couldn't get to all of the walls primarily because of what we just discussed in regards to the landscape, right? There was no way physically to get back there, much less the fire hazard and everything else, so I'm glad that'll get mitigated. Now that they have been cleared, we can get back there and do those things. But to the same point as to, it's just been neglected for a long time, right? The wall hasn't been painted nor, I guess, fines or assessments on overwatering and a lot of the other things that have happened to the wall have caused bigger cracks, have caused other things. It just takes a little while for us to be able to get it back to where it needs to be. That is the first initial stage, is to finish off, get rid of all the rest of the yellow, okay? So everything you can see from the street, if you go off the main drive here, most of those pony walls that were adjacent to Cibola Vista itself, we painted them anyway. Even though they weren't part of the initial thing, aesthetically it just looked better, right? So it made more sense to be able to do that. So there are still some, if you come in from the Joe Max entrance off of Spur Drive, you can kind of see some of those walls. And some of the other ones, now that they've cut down the trees and all the shrubs and whatnot, we can see them now, right? And they become a little bit more of an eyesore than what the nice brown is. So beyond that, that's the next phase. And then there's also a large perimeter wall that goes basically from the south, so the south wall, and then there's again the east that separates us, the wash there between us and West Wing. And again, it's that yellow color. Initially, we didn't include that as part of the HOA budget at the time, but primarily what we wanted to do is get the areas that you could see, right? Now that the trails have been built up and people are walking more in that area, we want to take care of those walls as well. So that perimeter wall that goes all the way around our community, all the way from Black Hills Road, which is way up north here, between us and the next community to our north, between us and West Wing, and then to the south where there's just vacant lots out there. All of that.
Just to chime in, because you and I kind of walked a lot of that. So
Yeah.
I know some of the first questions might be, well, why paint it? Because it's not like right in front of your face when you drive through the community. The answer to that is, when you buy a house, you paint only the sides that face the street and not the back, but you have to paint it. The other thing is, it becomes a lot harder for that to not become an aesthetics issue when you change the color.
Correct.
So you have a lot of walls that are dark, and now you have a lot of walls that are light. So even though it's not necessarily something that you may see every single day, you got it.
It's one of those things too where it's gonna give it another seal, right? So we got another seal on the backside of your fence. Same thing on the other things. And since they've cut down all the brush and everything else, people have done a lot of the things with the view fence, which is the third phase of this, the view fence. So the view fence becomes a little bit more cumbersome as well because now we're talking about shrubbery and growth from the homeowner's yard. So what happens in that particular case is we're going to have to probably go through and talk individually with individual people that have overgrowth or have maybe put more things on their view fence. When I bought a view fence before, I bought it for the view, right? These other, some of the view fences, it's a nice view of a ditch or gully or just more weeds. So people have gotten away from that and put their own shrubs and their own things. The issue is that in order for us to paint, we've got to paint 4 sides of those rails. And so some of those are going to have to either be moved, or we may have to come to a resolution where we say, you're going to waive your right, and essentially we'll see what we want to do as far as getting that.
2020?
Yeah.
Or 2022?
Hopefully 2020, yeah.
Yeah, we've accounted for it. This is why we're talking about it.
It's in the budget.
Yeah. So we really want to be able to, be as least invasive. There's other things, pets, all kinds of different things. If you think about having to go into people's yards to be able to actually paint that view fence. So that's where we work really close together in regards to the communication, making sure people are very aware of that. But there are some conditions and terms in the CCNRs that are questionable, so we just need to be able to go through and answer all of those things. That's not a me thing, it's definitely a board thing. But as we work our way through it, we definitely want to be available to answer any questions or anything too. Also, if you see anything in regards to any of the workmanship or any of those other things, even if there's touch-ups and things that you see in the neighborhood, I provided that also to PRM and to the board. It's service@paintwithprimo.com, and then just let us know. As a community member, I also want to make sure that the community is painted right as well. So we need to come back and do any other touch-ups or anything, or if you see something that happens, let us know so we can try to mitigate that right away.
I'd like to just ask a question. So, with that in mind, with the view fences, right, I understand logistics and everything, and that there's gonna probably be some properties that might be more difficult, people that have bushes, whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious if maybe it might be a good thing to get people that have the view fences, the people that are ready to go, are willing to move forward and or
Yeah.
negotiate or whatever dictates, people that want to be on that list at that, to put those on a list of people that are ready to rock and roll with that, to where you could potentially, I understand you'd probably like to come through and maybe just do it all, like a whole block, I don't know, but I'm just saying that as if you could find a whole block of people that are ready to go.
It'd be preferable for a lot of those other things. Even when I do my residential stuff, I tell them I'm not in the moving business, I'm in the painting business.
Right.
But people don't want to move their stuff. And so again, the best way to mitigate some of these other things is now you have to get beyond just the bushes. You got to get, can I get in your yard? No, I don't want you in my yard. So again, we have some other logistical things to work on, but I think that's a great suggestion.
My thought is just put out to what are your logistical requirements,
Right.
right? So people are aware, and then maybe have the people, that start signing
One
on.
of the things that we had discussed, and this is why it was broken into phases, right? So if you think about right now, like today, like tomorrow, once the budget's ratified, we could do the remaining shared walls within the community, and then the stem walls that are underneath where the railing is, so that all of the stuff, so think about all the stucco pieces are done.
Right.
Then the final thing is like.
And that we don't have to go into anything.
So
My only thought is, and I follow you, but my only thought is right, if you're there doing that stub wall, right, underneath the iron, and these people are ready to go, honestly, you got your equipment there and everything.
Yeah, the other issue is just going to be, is there going to be a cost to the association and or the homeowner? And what is that going to be? And are we going to charge a linear fee because you have a home of what you are, you know what I mean?
No, totally, I totally understand. So my thought is, put together the requirements, try and get that, and then, like I said, if you can get a whole block that's already signed off, and everybody on the block says, yeah, let's rock. You follow me? Because
Absolutely, yeah. As your painter, I would love to be able to just do the whole thing all at once. As a community member, do I want to see one that's painted, 3 that are not, 1 that's painted, 2 that are not? You know what I mean? So,
but if the requirements are out there, the sooner the day we get to the homeowners and what you're gonna actually need, like, and
My guess is how it would work best is for us to have a sign-up list for a block and pick your week. Pick your week and majority.
that way you know when your week is.
Goes and
Because a lot of homeowners have stuff hung on their wall.
no, totally, exactly.
So it's not just landscaping and access.
Yeah.
People have hung lights, people have hung.
Totally.
And there's some that got
So getting back
we'll see.
to a list of what you're gonna need
Yeah.
in order for you to facilitate your job and get that out to everybody's website or whatever.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'll go like up and down my block.
Yeah.
And I could probably get my whole street to sign up and say, we're ready to go.
And that's the difference too. I think honestly, the best thing about, living in the community, because I always see on Nextdoor and stuff too, they're like, I can't believe my neighbor did this, or I can't believe my neighbor did. You talk to your neighbor? Yeah, go talk to them. Make a friend, ask them, why they're doing that, you never know what the reason is. So I agree. I think community advocacy is going to be definitely one. But again, open communication is the other thing. And so as much as we can provide for you all, and I think that, again, there's several channels. The website will be another great channel to be able to have as well.
And just, as an example, in other communities that have shared railings that need to be maintained, typically there's a notice that'll go out well in advance, give people at least a good 30 days to know, maintaining, it's gonna happen this month. Here's your, you have stuff happening in your yard, please make sure you remove all obstructions. If there's an issue or there's something that you need to discuss, reach out, and then hopefully then you're just managing the exception and not the rule, and hopefully we can get everybody done.
I have bougainvillea, man, it's just
Yeah.
tacked.
Rip it out, man.
No, check it out, it's tacked up, and in
Yeah.
preparation of this. It's
Yeah.
ready to be unpinned and
Yeah.
rolled back and drop flop.
Yeah.
And I'll take care of all that, you know what I
That's
mean?
awesome,
I
yeah.
was just gonna ask, with the wrought iron and such, I know there's a lot of debate brought up before about some of it being in disrepair, a lot of rust, some of it's coming out of the actual footholds and whatnot, and the concrete barriers.
Right.
What's, like, just specifically with the rust, what's your process as far as the rust? I mean, you can't just paint over and expect the rust.
No, correct, yeah, so that's the added expense for that particular part of it as well. And so that gets sanded, it gets primed with an anti-rust, Rust-Oleum type thing. And then we do a natural direct metal paint. So it's a paint that actually does deter some of that rust for the future as well.
And then
So
what
we should
kind
get
of,
at least a good 10 years out of it.
so we have a 10-year warranty on the
Yeah,
paint?
correct. Yeah, I wish I could warranty the paint, I don't make the paint.
But if we get
But-
on a maintenance cycle with
But
it.
yeah, that's the manufacturer's warranty.
Gotcha.
But if we get on a maintenance cycle with it.
Correct,
right,
that's the point,
then
right,
you're-
exactly.
then you're
So they have it for 4 years, I think that's a little bit, that's really liberal for that. More conservative would probably be 8 years.
Yeah.
But if you have the point where, just like you said, if we start growing more of these other parts of the community, well, we have to do more walls, we have to do more maintenance, we have to do more of that type of stuff. So yes, if you paint your house every 8 years, you're not gonna have any problems with your HOA, with your neighbors, with your stucco cracking, a lot of
Or
that stuff.
paint early on, me
Right,
seriously.
right.
Yeah.
And in fairness and in openness, since you brought the issue up, and it should be, when your bid was received and so on, I don't think it was clear, he is a resident of the community as well
Yeah.
as somebody who bid, and his bid was, obviously reviewed and accepted. I don't want anyone to think that there were any connections or anything else, especially for the people that will be watching this later on. He is not only the painter, he is a resident. So it's almost like a vested,
Yeah, true, for certain, and that really, I mean, like, I was one of the folks when Kim was on the board and so forth too, and they started talking about it, I said, I actually discussed with my wife, and like, Mike, we need to paint these walls, like, this needs to be done, this needs to be done. And as a painter, when you go through your own community and you know that it needs to be done, you definitely want to take the time to be able to do so, and so it did just come to fruition, and it actually did work out very nicely for the fact, like I said, with the previous board, with the current board, with the last HOA management company, with the current has been even better. So, again, we look for a long-lasting relationship, and that's the feel.
thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, new business. Review and approve the financial reports. You received or should have received or at least had access to July, August, September, and October financial statements. I have seen everything except a full review of the October. Are there any questions, issues, comments? Anything that anyone has any questions? Okay, so we'll have that up to the end for approval. Review financial, approve items, okay. Actually, we had, we'll discuss this in open session because we don't need to go through and discuss what was approved in executive. There were 2 items that were unanimous written consent of the board during the time period between August and this open meeting. One was the approval of the seeding of the common area, the overseeding with the winter grass, and another was a removal of a tree that was obtrusive. Those were both voted on by the board, all board members. It was unanimous. Therefore, it was passed without an executive session or in open meeting. I'm bringing that up now so that everyone is aware that those 2 items were approved. It was not done without full board approval. If there had been anybody who would have disagreed with that, we would have had to table the motion.
And we would have been able to build a grass or seed grass.
The next item is something that we're considering. We haven't really moved into this yet, but we are going to, you want to?
So just as an output of the 2019-2020 budget review, and just looking at opportunities to continue to state. One of the things that we're doing as a committee is forming a subcommittee that's just going through and reviewing all of our contracts. I think the thing that's unfortunate is we had a lot of services that we knew the community needed, and they ended up being ad hoc or additional services, whether it be with landscaping, painting, etc. And ultimately, what we want to do is take anything that's a predictable expense or it's going to be a recurring expense and make sure that it's accounted for and in the budget. In addition, we've got a lot of homeowner feedback around things like having a website, what they'd like to see in terms of management company, what things they'd like to see in terms of landscape company. So we're taking all that feedback that we've gotten, and we're going to review all of that as it relates to our contracts, go back to our vendors to see what we can do to negotiate better terms and additional options for the community. We'll definitely look to get additional homeowner input on that as we progress with that. So there'll be follow-ups in future board meetings about that.
In ensuring that when we do go out to bid, if we go to 3 companies, all 3 companies get the same specs, and they're all quoting off of this, they're all singing from the same hymnal, and that way we know we're comparing apples to apples.
We don't have any more situations where we get less services and less price.
Yeah, a lot of feedback, and in all fairness to our vendors, right, who, you know, for the most part, there's not a landscape vendor or paint vendor, everyone's been great to work with, but a common piece of feedback we've gotten as well. I didn't have that piece of information, or this wasn't included in the initial ask, and so, yeah, part of it is you want to have that document. It's just a standard RFP process. You want to have your requirements outlined so that anytime you get a bid, everybody's bidding on the same thing, and also when you get delivery of what you asked for, it's to the RFP, request in the first place. So, we're going back through, just make sure we have that in place.
Next item is to discuss rodent control. There's been several posts and or issues with gophers and putting holes in the paths and other areas. We used to spend $150 a year, somewhere in that ballpark, I believe it was $150 a year for gopher control to Mr. Gopher. There was a question as far as, I'm sorry?
Was it Bill Murray or
Marvin Gunn. So there was a question raised about who authorized the expense. I believe it was an AAM authorization, but I do believe that the damage that they're causing far exceeds getting a quote or getting a bid and seeing if we can put a control on that. So I'm going to ask, if no one objects, to ask PRM to get us a quote for some varmint control along the paths, specifically gopher holes, etc. The next point is already been discussed, but this is a perfect time, Michelle, for you to jump back in. This is regarding the sprinkler head damage. We've had several reports. I don't know if you want to talk to it at all. If you want to, no. If you want to talk to it at all about the calls that you've received.
Yes, we've been receiving several calls of, I guess kids vandalizing the sprinkler heads. We had Ryan with ABC Scapes report that there was a really bad leak. There's a lot of water wasted. Not only sprinkler heads, the boxes, the water valve boxes, he was bolting down all of the boxes because the kids were lifting them and playing with everything inside. Well, he told me he completed that, but now these kids are actually going and removing the bolts. So it only helps so much. There's not much more he can do but go back and bolt it each time. So that is one issue we're having with the children, messing with the sprinkler heads, the water valves, and when the water's wasted, it's a lot of money being wasted as well. So that's why we ask if you see anything, if you hear anything, please call the office and let us know so we could, notify these owners what's being done.
When the website gets up, hopefully, can we send an email out to the parents, all the community, letting them know, hey parents, this is what's happening, maybe
So take pictures.
talk to your kids about
Those pictures of people.
The green belt over here, that's where the kids wait at the bus stop. But there's still probably at least 2 valves that are broken. I've reported it several times, and the repair person has gone out there. I've seen him out there, and I saw him, they were kicking the, the sprinkler heads, so it makes them shoot up and they run to their sprinklers while they're waiting for the bus. So, I mean, this area up there, I sent pictures as well, and it's like every morning there's a big pile, a big water puddle, a big area, so I think that there's another leak. I don't think it's fixed.
Where exactly is that?
It's the big green area, what's that called?
The green belt?
The green, yeah, the green
One that
grass.
faces the trail over here.
Yeah, it's on the other side of Cibola Vista, when you go down 91st,
Okay.
there's that grassy area where the kids play.
It's 91st in Cibola Vista?
Yeah, it's not in Cibola Vista, it's a little further in. It might be
Yeah, it's like hedgehog or something like that.
Right there, right? Wouldn't it be?
There's two of them, so there's this one over here, but then the bus
Yeah,
stop's
it's
on the
the
other
one
side.
down there.
It's like 91st and Hedgehog. I
Yes,
think.
that's where it is.
Could you maybe take your iPhone or phone and drop a pin in there and just send us what that location is?
Hey, hold on, I do it. Pictures, like, took a picture of the sign, I don't
I'll
think
do
it
it,
is.
I'll do it.
But I'm just saying that area has water leaks, and also in the big area here at Cibola Vista where the grassy area is, there's still some major leaks. And I did talk to the man that was out fixing it one day, and he had to put a whole new valve in it. It was broken. But there's-
I think running cycle at the time that you've seen, like, the kids kind of putting the message together, you can do.
Just adjust the screen.
Adjust the cycle, so that it's,
It's
they're
not
less.
It's not during the time that they're wet.
Right.
So change the bus stop area.
They already changed it once.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, okay, but yeah.
Alright.
But anyway, it's a waste of water.
If after this meeting, you can just, you have to take the time and drive over there all can.
Okay.
You said it's
I'll
grass.
send it to you.
Yeah, we have.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to.
We'll get it.
Oh.
I know it's like every time.
And they take those big boulders, rocks, and put them in the water, so that when the guys go to cut the grass, they have to go around. And I carried.
Who's carrying that? I'm starting to laugh.
I know, so I went and I carried all these rocks and threw them in the big, but these are big rocks, I don't understand why they do this.
Some more please.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to approve the items that we've discussed tonight. First item is to accept the 2020 budget as proposed. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the 2020 budget.
Which includes no fee increase and the expenditures as detailed. I'll second that. All in favor? And you even get to vote on this. Aye. Since you don't know the details of it. The second item that I want to make sure gets into the approval are the two items that we discussed at the executive session. This was our last meeting, and this was where we discussed with the homeowner their particular issue, and we resolved that issue, but we made a motion to, as far as fees and so on, and we also discussed the reimbursement, potential actions for continued reimbursement of legal fees on other situations. The details are contained in the executive minutes, but I would like to make a motion that we accept the items that we voted on outside of executive session, but I'm bringing it because it involves executive session items. I can only discuss them in general terms. One related to a homeowner fine, and the other was to continue action to recover legal fees. So I want to make sure that that is noted, that that was voted on and approved, and everyone knows what that is. We just can't get into any more details on that. Third item here, and I don't know if this even needs a vote, but I'm going to do it anyway, that we instructed Peoria to get us a quote for the rodent control. I don't even, no, we're not voting on doing it, so we don't, unless we want to say something to the effect of, if it's under $200 to go ahead and contract it. I'll make that motion.
How much is that?
If it's $200 or under, you have the approval to go ahead and authorize it. If it's above that, we'll entertain that at the next meeting. Are there any other items that we did not vote on that we talked about? I believe that's it. Okay, open homeowner session.
So, don't we need to actually vote on the budget?
We did.
Okay. We did. Sorry.
I mean, we voted on the budget?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
I'm reading too many.
Okay, can we continue on, I'm sorry, with the meeting and then we'll come back to the, thank you. Yes, Pam?
So are the minutes being taken by, is it Olivia?
Yes.
Correct.
And is that part of the, expenses that are on here
No, that's part
for
of
the
the
management company?
That's included in
That's included with the contract.
Just like it was with AAM, that's good.
Yep.
Yeah.
any other open homeowner items? Yes, ma'am?
When will the previous video links be posted?
Already done. Already done.
All of
Where?
the meeting has been.
On YouTube?
This is Cibola Vista HOA YouTube page.
It's been there for.
Yeah. I think you guys were posted.
We wouldn't know
before. The meetings you guys were recording, actually, I think you guys set that page up. When you were on board.
No, I didn't send you page, I thought it was YouTube.
Okay.
In the past, he was putting them on,
Then why are you asking about the links if you don't use YouTube?
I'm sorry, what?
Why were you asking about the links if you don't use YouTube?
I'd like to know where the links are, so
They're
I
on
can
YouTube.
view
They're on
them.
YouTube.
Don't need to.
Look up Cibola Vista HOA and boom, you'll find them first time.
Perfect.
Is rodent control only for builders?
Rodents, people,
Just a vermin in general.
We can't get rid of bobcats and coyotes. They're protected, gophers and groundhogs are not.
See how they're eating away the plants?
Yes,
You know, you guys did the landscaping, you said that to paths and stuff.
I'm sorry, can you do that?
When you guys
And then they're.
head back to paths and walking paths.
Yeah.
Some of those trees in that little area are all dead, and, or was that part of it, or is that gonna be a different issue, or are they just gonna stay there? There's some dead trees laying there.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. So when we contracted for it, basically, the issue at the time was that we had the amount of brush that was encroaching on the homeowner property line, and then just the trail itself. And so when we contracted to try to keep it as cost effective as possible, clear the trail, create the fire barrier, we knew that there was still going to be some dead overgrowth. What's interesting is if you look at how this part of the research we did, if you look at how other communities handle it, some of them clear that brush, some of it allow it to disintegrate because they want to keep that NAOS space as long as it doesn't create a fire hazard. I think one of the things that we are continuing to talk with the landscaper about is now that we've gotten the safety issues under control, like aesthetically, what should it look like? The challenge is just going to be with any additional over clearing, more of an expense, and so we constantly go back and forth. From a maintenance perspective, I would expect, you should expect to see that the trails will continue to look as they are in terms of clearance. I think if we're going to do any additional big cleanup, it's going to be something we're going to have to do in ad hoc.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. This goes back to, you may recall that there were discussions of replacing trees. Did we want to replace trees?
Yeah.
Do we want to look at different types of shrubbery or whatever else? That's all part of what we're doing now, which is, first of all, let's clear it away and look at it. And Patrick, I really got to, I mean, I know he doesn't want the recognition, but the hours of walking and working with the landscaper and so on, he has put in a tremendous amount of time. Clearing up whether or not we needed Army Corps of Engineers or not, and then working with the actual landscapers to clear it away and so on. It's just a tremendous amount of work, so I want to thank you.
I appreciate that. And I'm with you though, like, because we have, in the area that I live in, there's some pretty heavy overgrowth still, and so when we talked about this, we knew we had the upcoming expense with the paint, and then also some of the other things that we're doing with landscape, and just wanted to make sure we didn't, you know, allocated coverage, yeah, exactly. So I think there's gonna be an opportunity there, it's just stuff we'll continue to bring up in open session and talk about. We'll have, ABC come back in and provide some updates on this. Cool.
I just had a question follow-up from a previous meeting. I know there was an issue with VRBO or an Airbnb or something like that. I was just seeing what the board's like stance is. Are we gonna uphold that? Like, 'cause
So it's in violation of the HOAs.
yeah, as I read it, it's pretty much in violation. I just want to like reiterate, like.
And so, without getting into too much detail, yes, we're working it. We're trying to work with the homeowner, so then we don't have a lot of legal expense, and they don't have a lot of legal expense. And
So-
that's again our next step.
I'm not sure, I'm sure you guys know this, being well affiliated with the CCNRs and whatnot, but so we just refinanced, and there's actually a document that you sign when you buy your property, refinance, anything you do with the bank. It says you read and understand the CCNRs.
Correct.
And we actually reviewed it with our attorney, and they basically said, if anybody violates these, then they have no ground to stand on whatsoever.
That's
So,
correct.
I think we discussed this at the other open meeting. I mean, our position is we uphold what's in the CCNR. CCNR say you can't have rentals for longer than 90, rentals shorter than 90 days.
Okay, just making sure that
90 days.
everybody's on the same page.
And there are, I mean, I don't know if you've been watching the news at all, but Arizona is looking to pass a statute for short-term rentals because of the party houses, as they call them. And so the entire state is looking at restricting what can or can't be qualified. And it's throughout the country right now,
But regardless of the state, we
RCC,
still,
RCC.
yeah, so we don't have to worry about somebody throwing an Airbnb next door, because I'm pretty sure that nobody in this community wants that.
And our CDCs are very clear. They basically say, if you're gonna have a lease, you're gonna have a lease for at least 90 days. And you're supposed to turn that lease into the management company and state who the lessees are in case there's a violation while, they're renting property.
And if there's an emergency, to be able to contact someone who's there.
Yeah.
Any other homeowner items?
On the landscaping part of it, just so you're aware, so that backside, that southernmost part, pretty much what this community is at, where his neighbors at, that side did not get the mitigation done, so that might be something to point out to Ryan about that at ABC.
Where's that?
So just on the southernmost part, where I saw where you were walking that day, Chris, you know what I'm talking about? Like
Yeah.
around the backside of the community?
By Freedom Trail?
Yeah.
On the
Yeah,
backside.
on the backside of that, yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, again, there's a trail, it's a small trail there, but it does need the same stuff.
Is it the community's responsibility to maintain the brush along Freedom Court or not? You know, there's a lot of overgrowth that's covering the sidewalks and that. I mean, when you walk down there, I don't know if it's our responsibility or if it's a city or where is that at? Along Freedom Court.
The sidewalks and so the
there's a lot of-
trail where the sidewalks are. I think technically.
Well, as a board, I think we need to look at all of these quote-unquote open properties that haven't been built upon.
'Cause there's a-
Somebody owns them,
Right.
and they are an eyesore, and there's a lot of weeds growing on
There's a
them.
lot of junk.
And it's not even just the eyesore of the property that the weeds and everything are growing on. It's, they bloom, and it blows to your property and everyone else's, and guess what? Now we all have weeds. So I think that's something as a board we need to address, but thank you, we'll look.
As if there was a home there, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, somebody owns the lot, even if there's no home.
Well, that's how those
Right.
trees jet that whole wall up that we took out, right?
And
That's
then
exactly
I'll
how
say
this-
that, Matt Homeowner did a great job in repairing that wall.
Yep.
Getting it handed back to
Yeah.
Scott.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
that's all.
Absolutely.
Doing it right.
Anything else?
One question, are we going to, I know that the additional rock was in the budget.
Yeah.
Are we gonna think about doing that in 2020 on the other side, to put rock?
We have it in the budget, we haven't decided where and how much and so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think as a rule of thumb, what we'd like to do is student basis. So essentially you stagger it, so you start to have basically this year you do this phase, this year you do this phase, and so you're constantly making sure that it's refreshed, and
between the squirrels and the empty rock, it looks really bad on the side.
And I think to that point, I mean, anything in a common driving area where all buses and neighbors drive,
Right.
that should probably be a key priority to make sure it's always pretty clean.
Yeah.
I mean, it just helps our home values.
That's the face of the community, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Kim, you have another question?
I did, the next scheduled meeting was for December 11th, are we still, is that still?
No,
No?
No.
Canceled? When is our next meeting?
we have not determined that yet. We'll be sending out nomination forms for the board seat that's coming due, Damon. His seat will be coming due at the next annual meeting. So sometime in December, I'm expecting sometime in December, we'll send out the nomination forms. We'll have a meeting sometime either late January or early February to discuss those nominees. And then we'll send out the actual packet for the annual meetings with the nominees in there. So we just have to set the schedule. We haven't determined that yet. And we have to also look, I have to tell you, I know the weather's a bad thing as well, but Saturday mornings we had much better attendance. So we have to look at what times work for everybody and what's convenient for the community.
Another question is, the community, obviously, the single home that Freedom Corner community as well, the property that's west of there, is that part of our community as well, or is that commercial real estate that essentially?
Which house?
So we have the big cul-de-sac that's over here to the
Freedom.
west. Yeah, and that just adjacent to that, I guess, is that's all commercial land there? That's not part of our community, is that correct? Or
That is
part of our-
correct.
The one house that has the.
Yeah, so in other words, to the west of that.
Yeah,
Anything to Lake Pleasant from
The
where the
gentleman
church is
who
at
owns-
Lake Pleasant, I guess.
The gentleman who works with the Cibola Vista has that property as well, and they will be looking at some commercial application. He has not indicated what yet,
Yeah,
but we will have obviously some input into that.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. That's why I was just wondering whether there was going to be a rezoning or not.
Anything else? Okay. 7:58. We'll adjourn this, and we thank you very much. We're going to move into executive session, so